And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Barton Simmons. That's Tom Fernelli. Danny Cannell in state-ordered quarantine. Hope you are watching on YouTube right now. If you're not, you can subscribe. In fact, please subscribe to youtube.com/cover3. Of course, we are available in podcast form. If you're watching us on YouTube, it's multi-platform excellence. We've got a lot to get to today. We are going to let you know the top 10 team that is going to lose next to a team outside of the top 10. It has happened each of the last 3 weeks. If that trend holds, we're going to let you know who it is. And some more storylines ahead to the weekend, in addition to the Georgia-Alabama 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be on CBS in prime time. We're going to do a big game breakdown episode of that later in the week, really diving into all the different aspects of that top 3 matchup, actually, and much more. But listen, we know that this is more than just the SEC on CBS podcast. That was 2 podcast brands ago. I think the SEC on CBS podcast. We've been rebranded a couple times since then, but we want to make sure we're covering the entire country. So, we're going to be looking ahead to week 7 as well. But I think we got to start where it's pretty bad. Like there's a couple of places around the country where the fans are exasperated. They're looking around. They're wondering how we got to this place. They came into the season with college football playoff or conference championship hopes. And now you're just like, you're wondering, are we even going to have a 500 season? What does the future of our coaching position look like? I got to think that if you are an LSU or a Texas fan, and that was, remember, an interesting non-conference game that we would have had on this year's schedule, the return visit from LSU's win in Austin last year, it's not a great Monday feeling. What's the Texas message board looking like right now? Like how are things looking at Horns 247 right now?
I would encourage a visit. If anybody just sitting in the I don't know, the dentist's office waiting room, sitting in the airport, you're traveling, just take a little gander over at the Texas message boards. I mean not like, I know how sensitive message board communities can be about their plights, their struggles, their times of destitute. But it's just, I think it gives you an idea about, like, some of us might be able to excuse what's going on from the outside looking in, but when you're there and you're a fan, and there is, I think, an understandable frustration with Texas right now. And there is a lot of booster talk, a lot of buyout talk, a lot of this. I know this booster, I know that booster. I don't know how much, we haven't seen any sort of substantiated reporting on, and not the, and don't get me wrong, I don't think anyone's claiming Tom Herman is like going to get fired midseason or anything like that. But
his ass is on the hot seat, unquestionably.
Yes, I think his ass is on the hot seat. Yeah. I think, and so I think things got to get better. And I think that there has, and there's sort of talk of like a win total. It's, got to get to 7-3 or whatever it is. And again, look, all this is, I don't want to act like I'm sort of reporting all this or that there are even substantiated reports out there at all, but that's where the buzz is right now. And I think what's interesting about it, and we talked about, I don't think we have to sort of dig back into like what's the issues are with Tom Herman necessarily, because we've talked about it in just sort of the reaction to the game. But I think what's interesting is just that Tom Herman, he was the apple of everybody's eye. He was the guy for Texas. He was the home run hire. He was the guy they were targeting like 2 years out. He was the guy that beat LSU on, that staved off a Les Miles firing to get him, and all this stuff. And if he doesn't work out, I think what's interesting, more so than just fans are restless and want the coach gone, because that happens everywhere. What's interesting is like, all right, where do you think you can go next? And, you're seeing the Urban Meyer talk. You're seeing some Kyle Shanahan talk. That sounds like a little bit far-fetched. I can maybe get behind some Urban talk, but I just think that sort of to me is going to be a part, like it has to be part of your decision if you're thinking about going in a different direction in a year like this. What you better make sure you're confident who you can get, because it's not a total disaster with Tom Herman. It's just not what you want it to be yet. So I think as that is fleshed out within the 40 acres, I'm interested to see, what the conversation looks like moving forward about who they're trying to get.
There are so many layers to this that are just fascinating to me. And like Tom Herman's on the hot seat, but I feel like whether it's Texas or Texas A&M, the coach is always on the hot seat there. Because last week we were talking about the same thing with Jimbo. Like, is this what you're paying $75 million for? They go out and beat Florida. That quiets things a little bit. And now, Texas loses to Oklahoma, and now it's Tom's back on the hot seat. But you also mentioned, like, when Tom was the number one clear-cut top choice for the top schools that off season when he was available, and it was between LSU and Texas. And I think about how there was the back and forth there between LSU, Texas ends up getting them. LSU ends up with Orgeron, and at the time there's a lot of like, wow, going from Tom Herman to Ed Orgeron, talk about a step backward, having to hire your interim coach. But then of course, 8 months ago, LSU's doing victory laps because Ed Orgeron has won a national title, and Texas is Texas, and they haven't really done a whole lot since hiring Herman. But now 8 months later, yes, LSU still has its national title, but Tom Herman's on the hot seat, and LSU's 1-2 and unranked, and there's questions there, and Ed's getting kind of feisty and ornery with his coordinator situation again. And then now going to the Urban Meyer aspect of it, let's not forget that when Herman left Ohio State to take over this job, Herman was like kind of critical of a lot of things Herman was doing at Texas, and openly saying it while he was, still coaching, and then while he's been, in the media sitting at Fox. And I think that if Tom Herman did get fired, I think Urban would want to replace him.
That
honestly,
is
because I don't
interesting element there.
Yeah, because like I know Herman, they won a national title together at Ohio State, but I've always gotten the sense that while they worked together, I don't know if they're that close or if they're that friendly. That's the kind of impression I get just from the way that they've talked, or like Urban's treated it, but Urban could just be being Urban. So if Herman gets fired and Urban replaces him again, there's just a whole lot of crazy, weird angles about this.
Urban literally put his job on the line for Zach Smith. Mm-hmm. And we know Zach Smith and Tom Herman don't like each other. Mm-hmm. The idea that Urban would be more and again, like, reminder to all of our listeners and all of our viewers that none of this is reporting. It is just talk, and college football is talk. And that's why this is so much fun.
Let us do this. Just let us.
Please. Like, this is the kind of irresponsible chatter that has powered the intrigue in this dumb, beautiful sport for decades. And too many times our wildest fantasies, if they don't come true, they're pretty close to being right. And that whole, after everything that we made of Urban Meyer and the potential of going to USC, the idea that he would even be holding out, thinking it's like, well, Tom Herman did just fire both of his coordinators. So I might just sort of sit back and wait to see how things go right now in Austin right now.
Well, what's funny is I saw a Texas message board post that was like, you know what, like, Herman's, needs to be gone, but we should keep Yursich and Ash, and like those, like they need time to get their system in place. And
was Urban Meyer defensive coordinator,
and offensive coordinator. Like Yursich was on Ohio State staff. Like Urban could just step right in and keep the coordinators, guys he knows, and just like keep it rolling. But it's crazy to think about. And I do think the reality is, like, Urban Meyer is an incredibly competitive person. You can't tell me he doesn't like love this stuff, and you can't tell me he wouldn't be intrigued by the idea of getting a national championship at a third different school. And to think that to see this graveyard of coaches that have come through and failed, and to be the guy that steps in and gets that thing right. It makes a lot more sense than a lot of the other far-fetched rumors that we typically hear.
He wants the LeBron championship. Third program, third ring. Yeah, that's
the only way. Like, if you look at the way things have gone, the way Saban's been at Alabama and the way Dabo is kind of climbing at Clemson, the only way really for the Urban at this point to get back into the greatest college football coach of all time conversation, if that's something he cares about, would be to go to a third school and win a national title at a third different school. And if he could do that at Texas, it's just, that's a place you can win national titles.
Yeah. Stupid trio.
Yeah.
To be able to put as a rep. All right. So to bring it back to what Herman, because Tom Herman was out here, what was he saying? That, we've got issues to fix, but they're fixable. And they do have this coming week off. They are scheduled to be back in action on the 24th against Baylor at home. So the remaining games, Baylor at Oklahoma State, West Virginia, at Kansas, and then home against Iowa State. And then the last game of the regular season scheduled to be at Kansas State on December 5th. Barton, I have not looked at that, so you could use the message board win total talk to inform your opinion here. But where do y'all see Tom Herman's future hanging looking at this Texas schedule? Like where is it? Maybe a number, or maybe a game that you can't win, or maybe a game that you can't lose.
I think you can't lose the next one. I mean, their next game right now is scheduled for Baylor. Baylor just had another game postponed because of positive tests. So if they come back and they're playing a Baylor team that has been dealing with COVID cases and contact tracing and having games postponed all season long, it hasn't played in, I don't know, it'd probably be 3 weeks or so at that point by the time that game's played. If they come back against that team and lose off of a bye week of their own, it's going to turn up a lot.
This is what is so hard about the Big 12 is with all the parity and with all the competitiveness of that conference, there really is still only two blue bloods. There's only two teams that you're kind of allowed to lose to. And yet all of them are capable of beating you. And so it doesn't look good if you lose to Oklahoma State either. It doesn't look good if you lose to West Virginia. It doesn't look good if you lose to Iowa State or Kansas State. You could lose to all of them, any of them. And so I don't really know what it looks like. I was tempted to say, I just think the product's got to look better. Maybe it's not about wins and losses, it's about the product looking better, but I'm not sure that that's true. I think it probably is about wins and losses. And it's about, at this point, you sort of lost your safety net a little bit, you're barely surviving against Texas Tech and going 0 against an average Oklahoma team and TCU. You just lost your margin for error. So I don't know, 2 more losses along the way feels like it'd be tough to swallow.
Yeah, because this was a perfect situation for Texas because it's not just that they came into the season with the senior quarterback and Oklahoma is going to a young and experienced quarterback for the first time, but going into this game on Saturday, they were coming off the loss to TCU, but Oklahoma's reeling. They've lost 2 conference games, and you've got a chance not only with your senior quarterback against a freshman quarterback to, beat Oklahoma, but literally, not literally, but, put a knife in their season, really, the death stroke that would have knocked Oklahoma out of any real, legitimate Big 12 talk. It definitely would have taken them out of the playoff talk, and you blew it. And I feel like that was a moment where it's going to be like a turning point. Like if they had won this game, that might have been the starting point or the upward trajectory of this program under Tom Herman. They might have looked back and that might have been the quote unquote signature win where everything turned around, but they didn't. And now it really looks like it's going to go the other way because you look at the schedule that they have left and you just look at the way that they've played, and it's not unreasonable to think that they're going to lose 2 more times at some point.
I think the Iowa State, Kansas State finish is brutal because Texas could lose both those games. And if Texas finishes a hot seat season with losses to Iowa State and Kansas State.
With a backup QB now.
Oh, yeah, because Skylar Thompson, not just out for the game, but now out for the rest of the season. Like, if that Kansas State game in Manhattan, no Skylar Thompson, though granted we would be like, fully transitioned on for the Wildcats by then, but like that's it. Like you could go 3-1, Baylor, West Virginia, Kansas, and Oklahoma State, but you finish with a couple of losses to decidedly non Big 12 blue blood schools. That could be a wrap, man. I don't know.
Urban to Austin. Let's get it going, boys.
I think we did. I think we one other program.
Mainstream.
Yeah. All right. So we mentioned LSU's role in all this, and LSU, from Tom Herman to Coach O, now all of a sudden the Tigers are 1-2 after losing to the Nerd. And like you have,
can that just be our designated nickname for Eli?
Yeah. The Nerd.
The Nerd. And we say it with reverence.
With love. I mean, listen, it is you need somebody who's going to be great in job interviews and great on the chalkboard when you're drawing up your offense.
But here's the thing, like, here's my contention with Eli Drinkwitz being cast as a nerd is he looks nerdy, but he's got like really good swagger for a nerd. Like nerds are typically
it's a great time to be a nerd. Nerds are swaggering all over the place these days.
Like nerds are like socially awkward and a little bit like reserved and don't, have some sort of self-conscious. Eli Drinkwitz is from a personality standpoint. He's like an alpha nerd. He's a nerd.
That's his nickname. The alpha nerd.
The alpha nerd. All right. I can roll with that.
I mean, he never played.
Did he not? I don't even know.
Like he got his start by being quality control for Gus Malzahn in high school ball. I mean, you really have been working. You showed up with the annexation of Puerto Rico on the printout on the dot matrix printer, and the high school coach is like, "You got it. Well, we're gonna let you on staff right here."
All right. All right, alpha nerd it is.
Yeah, alpha nerd. Yeah, okay. Because again, with reverence,
the swagger nerd.
I didn't play football, right? And I'm out here talking about it. He didn't play football, and he's out here coaching it in the SEC. All right, game, respect, game. Alpha nerd. All right, so now all of a sudden LSU looks like it's in trouble because defensively they are horrendous. We talked about that a little bit on the instant reaction pod, but the focus on Bo Pelini here is very, very harsh. And, as we saw, and I think y'all mentioned this as we were getting ready to record, as we saw Coach O sort of, get after Matt Canada, get after Dave Aranda. I mentioned that going into the season, there was some commentary that, that he thought that the schemes under Dave Aranda were too complicated. He was looking forward to Bo Pelini getting back in the 4-3, lining up and getting after it. And now all of a sudden on the SEC teleconference today, Coach O says, I don't care if we just run one play on defense. It's got to be one that we can execute. So, LSU now goes from, we understand there's going to be a step back, but we've got all this talent to like, I don't even know if it's a 500 season. Like, am I overreacting? Is there a bright light or any reason to believe that the Tigers can turn this around?
Define turn it around.
I mean,
because like, can they finish above 500? Yeah. But like compete for the SEC West? No.
But all right. So their common game with South Carolina, they both beat Vanderbilt 41-7. They got Florida, South Carolina, Auburn, Alabama, Arkansas, A&M, and Ole Miss. All right. Arkansas and Ole Miss are no longer with games you can just chalk up as wins. South Carolina, it's just by definition has been proven to be at least on similar footing based on the way they beat Vandy. Auburn is still Auburn. Even if it's a little bit down Auburn, they're playing a little bit down LSU. Florida, Alabama, A&M all of a sudden is a top 10 team, et cetera, et cetera. Like there isn't a game on this schedule. There's not one where you just say, well, at least they got that one. That's a win. I mean, they've played those games. Though if you were going to do Vanderbilt, you would have played like Missouri, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State. Like you could, like before the season, if you're chalking up, like if you're going through their schedule, you're saying, well, I mean, they should start 3-0 and then let's see what happens. Right. And that's the easy part of their schedule is gone. And so they've got some fixing to do. I kind of the Bo Pelini, like Ed Orgeron is it seems like he's gone after the year, right? Like it just like it's almost a given. I mean, as bad as they've played so far,
depending on how the Florida game goes, he might be gone before that. I
mean, they still got to play. I mean, look, maybe their defense is going to make a lot of improvements, but Ed Orgeron has been.
I'm just going to take it over.
he's made kind of splash hires in the past. Like I remember, so Matt Canada was sort of the hot name among the offensive coordinators. He whiffed on Lane Kiffin, couldn't get Lane because Lane went to FAU, and then he went Canada, who was his backup as sort of the hot coordinator, and that just didn't fit what he wanted to do, how he wanted to do it, and so his second hire was much less the hot coordinator and more Steve Ensminger. I trust him. Let's just get it done here. I wonder if Bo Pelini was just big name, hot hire, let us roll, and I like what the backup to Bo Pelini will become, because things got to get, like, this defense is terrible. They're not tackling well. They're not doing the fundamental stuff well. They're not getting lined up. They're not, like, it's just there's communication issues. It's just kind of bad all the way around. And so I think the message is the right one from Coach O is just, we got to get it simpler. We got to get these guys playing because they're thinking. And credit to Eli Drinkwitz, credit to the Alpha Nerd, because he made them think a lot in that game. That offense was running circles around them. But hey, at least, because to answer your initial question, like kind of the how bad is it at LSU deal or whatever, like how bad is it going to be? The offense, even though they didn't run the ball, the offense did put up 41.
Yeah. Marshall Jr.'s still sick.
Terrace Marshall Jr. just broke Jamar Chase's record. Like, so the offense can still score points. I think they'll still will continue to score points.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they're scoring, in 3 games, they've scored 34, 41, and 41. The offense is not the problem, but the fact that they've scored that many points and they're 1-2, not great.
It's interesting. Well, it's interesting. Like we excused last year's an uncharacteristic LSU defense as a byproduct of playing opposite this wide open offense that was not characteristic of LSU or frankly any SEC team. And I wonder now, as we think back, or if we were to look back, if we would judge that differently defensively based on how this defense is playing this year. Now they had some dudes, they had Patrick Queen and the DBs but I don't know. Like there seems to be something missing, whether it's just physicality, discipline, fundamentals. I don't know, but there's this is not the LSU that we're used to seeing defensively.
Yeah, but that defense also got better as the season wore on. I mean, like that we were surprised by it really early because we weren't, like, that Texas game, we weren't used to seeing LSU playing those kind of shootouts, so we were just still kind of acclimating ourselves to what was going to be LSU. But if you look, then there was the 38 points against Vanderbilt, which were like, what the hell? Where you're like, this is bad. But then it was, they got into the SEC. They held Florida to 28. They held Mississippi State to 13, Auburn to 20. Alabama put up 41 on them, but it's Alabama. Mississippi put up 37 on them, but they were doing that to everybody. And then they pretty much shut down Arkansas A&M. Then they, held Georgia to 10 points in the SEC championship. They held Oklahoma to 28 in the playoff. They held Clemson to 25. That defense got better as the year went along, and it really wasn't as bad. It just wasn't up to the typical LSU standards.
Right.
This year's LSU defense is bad.
It is bad.
Good luck. You're last place in the SEC West. and there's not one SEC West team. Like, maybe Auburn doesn't look all that threatening, right? I guess Arkansas doesn't have a super dynamic offense, but
I mean, they should be favored against. I don't know.
I don't think they will be favored at Auburn, though.
No, I wouldn't think so either. I guess they'll be favored against Arkansas.
Yeah, I would think that Arkansas is really they'll be favored against South Carolina and they'll be favored against Arkansas. But honestly, looking at things right now, those are the only two games I think on the schedule we could say with like extreme confidence that they'll be favored in.
Coming up on the other side, what does the bounce back look like for teams like Miami and Florida? What top 10 teams should be on upset alert going into the weekend? And other storylines we've got our eyes on for week 7 next.
We want to welcome a new show to the CBS Sports Podcast family. Finally, Que Golazzo is a daily soccer podcast. That's right. That aims to bring you the best analysis and commentary from the world's game. The gambling previews, an immediate match recaps, and react to all the latest news from the Champions League to the Premier League to the Americans in Europe and everything in between. It's truly a must listen if you're like me, a soccer fan. This Wednesday, the team will be releasing their first full episode to recap the international break, of course, but you can go subscribe now to Que Golazzo on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else podcasts are found.
Yeah.
Yes. That felt good.
Great job. Noted soccer fan, Barton Simmons, soccer dad, Barton Simmons, with an A+ promo for our friends Que Golazzo in the new soccer podcast on the CBS Sports Podcast family. It was the international break. We had no Fiorentina, we had no Napoli, we had no Aston Villa.
It's been an empty couple weeks.
Been an empty couple weeks.
Too much football, not enough football.
That's a free sounder, Que Golazzo. You want to get that from Barton Simmons? That's we'll let you have that one. Viewers on YouTube, remember, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/cover3. We are not going to be handing out wardrobe changes for every single show, but I have made a little change because we had some breaking news. We had some breaking news. So we've got a cancellation in the SEC, and it was funny because the Missouri and Vanderbilt has been postponed until December because of positive COVID tests at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was already very thin going into this past weekend for its game against South Carolina. South Carolina put it on them. And, you know, it was interesting because when the news first came across, I will admit that it didn't click to me as being like world shaking because we've had 25, maybe 20, it was 25 going into the weekend games postponed or canceled because of positive COVID tests, but it is the first one in the SEC. And so I understand that, trying to figure out, it was new territory for the Southeastern Conference, and Tom, I don't know, did I do okay in my hit? I was kind of like, hey, yeah, bud, it's what's happening. This is the way it goes. The puzzle pieces are going to have to be rearranged. It's just what's going to happen.
On a scale of 1 to 5 chips, I would say it was a 3.5 chip hit.
Yeah, it was. I would like to get back to Cover 3 podcast.
Yeah.
But how does this stand out to y'all, at least in terms of looking at it going into this weekend for maybe the Missouri side of things, or maybe even for the Vanderbilt side of things? Now just trying to get the team literally healthy enough to be able to go compete.
Next, they were. It's like I saw a tweet. They were down to 56 players against South Carolina.
Yeah. Well, not only were they down to 56 players, 4 of those players were quarterbacks. They're healthy at quarterback, and they had so what does that put them at, 53 for for position players? I mean, they're basically at the max or the minimum as it was. So hey, look, maybe you can look at this as a reason to buy low for Vanderbilt, maybe if they get back to sort of a closer to a healthy roster, then that can help them. I think that down the road, here's what's really interesting to me. I was talking to a college staffer just this morning, and are y'all aware of what it means to quarantine in a college football program? I mean, I wasn't. I kind of had assumptions, I guess.
Aren't they? Are they pretty much assigned to their dorm room or whatever for the entire?
So here's what this program does. If and this is a contact tracing quarantine. So if a player is roommates with somebody whose girlfriend got COVID or something, and they've got their contact tracing, they got tagged. They go to a hotel room for 2 weeks, and they don't leave that hotel room. Like, they haven't even tested positive, and they go 2 weeks where they don't get fresh air. They work out for like an hour workout on a Zoom meeting. I guess it's a body weight workout with their strength coach. They get their meals brought to them. They jump on those Zoom meetings for their position meetings or whatever they can do virtually. But it's basically solitary confinement for 2 weeks. And then, let's say this is a fairly significant player that is contact tracing tagged. He goes into solitary confinement basically for 2 weeks, and then he emerges, and it's not like he's going to be in playing shape. It's not like you just stick him in there and throw him 75 plays, next weekend. So it's this very, like, I'm really surprised that is not more discussed. But like, this contact tracing stuff with the 14 days. And now, look, granted, I don't know, maybe not all programs are handling it like that. Maybe you're significantly less strict. Maybe some aren't sort of playing it by the letter of the law. Maybe some aren't doing the contact. I don't really know how this is all regulated, but to just think that's going to be that, like, that's the life of a football player that gets tagged is just 14 days chilling in the Marriott. Like, that's just crazy to me.
Do the schools at least give them Netflix accounts to use?
I imagine these kids have like everything anyway on their computers.
I mean, that sounds like hell, but it also sounds like heaven at the same time, to be honest. Not having to deal with anybody for 2 weeks right now, that wouldn't be that bad. But yeah, you probably get bored really quickly.
I mean, like, I would be very concerned about the mental health coming during that time and coming out of it. Like, that is a very challenging psychological experience for somebody who is surrounded by teammates and friends all the time and is used to moving in big packs of people. That's, I hope that there are there's a lot of attention and a lot of support that's being also provided along with that. I mean, wasn't that, I believe that was one of the many struggles for Xavier Thomas, the Clemson defensive end. Like, not only did he come out of, he was in quarantine for a long time. He was, struggling a little bit. He put on some weight and he sort of fell out of shape. And now, he is still working his way back to being able to play and compete. But according to Dabo Swinney, that was a physical and a mental journey for him to be able to get all the way back from extended quarantine time. So I understand, Tom, why you're throwing that sounds awesome. I will say that sounds like a big time struggle. Like you mentioned, Barton, just no fresh air. Like, it's a lot.
Yeah, see, that would be the part that gets me. I think I could go without human interaction for longer than 2 weeks if I had to. It's just the being penned up inside that would drive me insane.
Especially you're getting in some workouts in that room.
Yeah,
like,
it's gonna be musty.
I get a little musty.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So as we turn our attention to sort of the way that things are going to start progressing here for let's say for teams like Miami and Florida, teams that remain very much with everything that they want to accomplish still out there. Miami comes out of that loss 42-17 to Clemson with one ACC loss, but everything's ahead of you. You win all the rest of those games, you get a rematch with Clemson at the end of the year. Florida, yes, you lost right here against Texas A&M, but we talked about the schedule setting up such that if that's your only loss, you still go into Jacksonville with the chance to beat Georgia and be able to have a leg up in the SEC East. Like, do you see those two teams being able to come out of those games without too many concerns about who they are and what's ahead?
I mean, it depends. Like, if I'm Florida, I'm not worried. I'm with you. Like you were saying last week, losing that game to Texas A&M when you called it's not really going to change the way that I feel about Florida, and losing in the manner that they lost doesn't really change the way that I felt about Florida, because we knew just watching them in their first two games against two average-ish SEC teams in the way that they were giving up and hemorrhaging points and yards that, all right, Florida's defense is probably going to cost it a game or maybe two at some point, but the offense is awesome. And that's kind of what we saw in, College Station there against Texas A&M. Whereas with Miami, I don't know if my mind has changed all that much either, because like I've argued that might be the second best team in the ACC, and it might still be the second best team in the ACC, because just because you're the second best team in the conference doesn't mean that I really think you were capable of competing with Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
And that was evident, clearly on Saturday night. That team's not ready to compete with Clemson, but Notre Dame might not be able to compete with Clemson. North Carolina might not be able to compete with Clemson. I don't know if any of those losses really changed my outlook on either team for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change the opportunity for Florida. I mean, Florida if Florida was to get into the playoffs, they were going to have to beat Georgia anyways, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to have to beat Alabama anyways, probably. So or whoever comes in the West.
Come on.
So right, exactly. So this like nothing changes. I think the thing that is more if any, the more concerning part for both of these is just sort of what we saw. Okay, like not that we thought Miami was going to beat Clemson, but hey, can Miami beat Clemson? And okay, clearly that they're just not there. This is just not what that program is. Florida, okay, we know their offense is good. How is their defense a concern? Because it might be. Oh yeah, it definitely is. And so I think I think everything's still in front of both of those teams. I mean, hell, Miami could run the table and still beat Clemson again in the ACC championship game. Florida could run the table and they've got their playoff hopes right in front of them. I just think that they have big issues that they have to address, whether that's the wide receiver position for Miami, or the offensive line being stout enough, or whatever it is in Florida, all the defensive issues that popped up against A&M. I think the schedule still is kind of what it was, and it's kind of good that these games came as early as they did.
Do you think that Miami can improve or at least make adjustments to its offense to address the wide receiver play? Because that was clearly the game plan, part of the game plan. The idea that we think our cornerbacks can be able to go one-on-one against your wide receivers, and we're going to send some blitzes from the linebacker position, try and contain and keep Derek King in the pocket. Like, is there a way that Miami is able to improve in those areas by the end of the season?
I mean, they're not going to play those Clemson DBs
again.
Yeah,
that's what I was about to say. It's like they're not facing Clemson's defense for the rest of the season. I don't know about just improving in general, because those areas were still somewhat problematic even before the Clemson game. It's just Clemson really exposed it. I think they can improve it. I just don't know how much of an improvement you can make, because, Barton's going to have a better idea of this than I do as far as the overall talent level of the roster. But I don't know if there's like a game breaker at the receiver position on that team to begin with. And I don't know if one's just going to suddenly emerge from nowhere.
Yeah, I don't think there is, because he'd be on the field.
Yeah.
This is a new system that was installed this offseason. This is not the wide receiver position. Doesn't necessarily, it's not one that takes a ton of physical development. You can roll out of high school and be physically ready to go. I just don't think he's there, and that's surprising. And that's it defeats the whole purpose of sort of not the whole purpose, but part of the purpose of installing a spread system, like a wide open players in space sort of system at Miami. Because you figured you're going to have, that's like the least of your issues is the wide receiver position, but Miami's got to get that squared away.
Going back to Florida, I want to pose an opinion to you two. I brought it up on Twitter on Saturday. I still think I'm right, but I did receive pushback, so I want to see what you guys think. In a year where Oklahoma is not going to be Oklahoma because it's already got 2 losses and it just doesn't look quite the same. Florida is this year's Oklahoma, in that it's going to be really good and it's going to be really fun to watch, and it might make the playoff. but it has no chance of winning a national title with that defense.
So is your argument that Florida is this year's Oklahoma, or is your argument that Florida has a good shot at being the second SEC team in, or are they just one and the same argument?
It's that, yeah.
Or are you saying they could be the one SEC team in?
Like they're a team that is good enough to be one of the best 4 teams in the country. They're a team that is good enough to make the playoff the way that they're playing. It's just once they get to that playoff level, like Oklahoma, they don't have a defense that's good enough to beat 2 other elite teams. And like, that's how I felt about Oklahoma last year when I was saying early in the season, it's like, this team has no chance of winning a national title, not with this defense. I don't care how great their offense is. And that's just how I feel about this Florida team, in that they're kind of taking that mantle this year, where I think that they're definitely good enough to get there, but they can't win it.
So you're not saying that as any sort of prediction about what's going to happen this year. You're more saying that, like, if you stick this Florida team, these 85 players in the Big 12 this year, then they're probably winning it and they're probably in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
No.
Chip? No? Who's going to beat them?
Just hating ass Florida. Georgia homer. Soft ass team, overrated Kyle Trask. They can't run the ball. It's not just defense. Offensive line ain't worth anything. No, I think that the part of it that I definitely agree with the most is the way Barton framed it, where if you stick this Florida team in the Big 12 this year, they probably win it, make it to the playoff, lose in the semifinals. But I do think that the lack of like those Oklahoma teams could run the ball. Now they could run it with like Jalen Hurts, or they could run it with, Trey Sermons or Kennedy Brooks. I don't think Florida's a very good running team. You don't have to be, but not all that impressed with it.
Hey, how salty is the Big 12 fan that just heard that conversation go down? Okay. Like, now the SEC starts doing Big 12 stuff, and then just one of these SEC teams is getting beat in the Big 12 manner is going to come to our conference and just win it because it's the SEC team. But I don't know. I think it might be right still.
I think in this case, yes. If I look at everybody in the Big 12 and I look at Florida, I don't know who in the Big 12 is beating Florida.
If you give Florida's wide receivers and Kyle Pitts and the rest of the wide receivers to anybody in the Big 12, the upgrade is immediate and tremendous right off the bat.
Yes.
And there's just not talent like that at the wide receiver position right now in the Big 12.
Yeah. And to your point about them running the football, I mean, that's, yeah, I get it. But it's sort of like the LSU thing. LSU's getting dinged for not running the football well, but I mean, LSU put up 41. Florida's not running the football well, but they scored on, I think it was 7 of 9 possessions or something. I mean, what more you want? And so, and I get I'm not dismissing the point, but I think it's kind of an interesting discussion, is like, does it really matter? And maybe it does, but I don't know. Like, I think if you're that efficient throwing the ball, I don't know, for a 4-minute offense, I guess, is what you kind of need. But
hey, I know you're all about the pass as the extension of the run game. Who needs to run the ball when we're just throwing little swing passes and just getting the ball out of the perimeter, let skill players do their thing?
Mike Leach's entire existence is based on that principle.
All these analytics nerds are just infiltrating all of our brains.
The alpha nerds.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's the other thing we didn't talk about too, with the postponed Mizzou Vandy game. That just gives Alpha Nerd an extra week in the lab. Oh,
you don't want to give Alpha Nerd an extra week of prep.
Nope.
Missouri was like, they could use a little time to get cleaned up too, because they had a bunch of guys out for COVID. And as we've seen with Virginia Tech, one good showing on a bit of a COVID dinged roster doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to be good showings on a COVID dinged roster. So, hey, that might have been just what the doctor ordered from Missouri too.
And who's Missouri's next scheduled game?
It's isn't it against Florida?
Yep. Tiger's going to take another one down.
Alpha Nerd, let's go.
That's going to be a sick Big 12 showdown right there.
My argument on HQ was, it does stink a little bit for Missouri because you've coming off the LSU win with a lot of juice, and you were going to beat Vanderbilt. It's a chance to string a couple wins together with a first-year coach They're not the ones with they have they could use some time to get healthy, but they weren't the ones that hit cancel on this meeting.
I had Missouri minus 17. That was a big circle around that one. So that's I thought I had at least another leg on my Vandy train for this weekend, but not to be.
All right. Each of the last 3 weeks, there has been a top 10 team that has lost to a team not in the top 10. And in almost all the cases, I think there's 4 instances of this in the last 3 weeks. Top 10 team takes a loss. And I think in 3 of them, maybe even they were straight up unranked, but at least in one of them, it was a team that was lower ranked. Texas A&M was ranked when they took down Florida. So top 10 team is going to lose next. And basically I'm ruling out Georgia and Alabama because obviously a top 10 team is going to lose right there. Yeah. So who is the next top 10 team that is going to be taking an L to a team not in the top 10?
What you got, Tom?
I'm of 2 minds here. Initially, I wanted to say it was going to be Florida
against LSU.
But I really, it could happen because, again, LSU's offense has not been the problem. And, defensively, they're bad. So Florida's going to score a bunch of points, but Florida's been scoring a bunch of points against everybody. It scored a bunch of points against the Aggies.
Great Big 12 game in that Florida LSU matchup.
Yeah. And they might, LSU might score a whole bunch of points against Florida. In fact, it probably will, but I still think that Florida's going to win that game. So I'm going to go with October 24th, Devin Leary and the NC State Wolfpack taking down the North Carolina Tar Heels in Raleigh. Chip's going to be there. He's going to have half his face faded red, half his face painted Carolina blue, and tears streaming down one cheek after NC State takes down the Heels.
Games at Chapel Hill, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Oh, my bad.
I think so. You think that we're going to that everyone's going to survive next weekend, huh?
I'm not super confident, but I don't think the Tar Heels are losing to Florida State. I don't think Cincinnati's losing at Tulsa, although I do think that is not something we should just assume. And I do think Florida will squeak by LSU.
I think North Carolina at Florida State is absolute danger zone, total danger zone. This is the first time that they've been ranked in the top 5 since 1997. And do you know who their next game was? It was against Florida State. And they lost. I was at that game. Game day was there. Everyone was all fired up. It was a nighttime game, and this was going to be it. This was this was going to be the national recognition game. And Florida State came out, and granted, very, very different era of North Carolina football. But Florida State just came out and was like, you're not moving the ball. Final score is 20-3. And it was just so apparent from the middle of the first quarter on that North Carolina wasn't going to score a touchdown. And it just took the life out of the building. And maybe it is those childhood memories that has me a little bit wary of this. Because granted, last 2 visits to Tallahassee, 2010 and 2016 for North Carolina, have been wins, including Nick Weiler doing the tomahawk chop down the field after kicking a game-winning field goal to take down the Seminoles in 2016. But 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. I don't know, man. I'm a little bit more wary of that. My pick would be Cincinnati though, because Tulsa's good.
I was going to say there's one key difference between that 1997 Florida State team and this 2020 Florida State team. And it's that this Florida State team has already lost 3 times as many games as that 1997 Florida State team lost. They went 11-1. This one's 1-3.
That's a very fair point.
So has there been I think this is true, that there has been a top 10 team lose maybe even to an unranked team every game since the week 3 release of the top 25?
Yeah. That's the trend we're tracking.
Did you set that up?
Yeah. Yes.
right.
Barton's too busy writing some
Well,
8-year-old kid about
Listen, you know that like the uptick can be a little slow sometimes. I thought this was just like a great idea for like a second. Okay, so to keep the trend going, then because I am not convinced it's gonna like that this is gonna skip a week. So I'm over here doing some work while you guys are just chatting Kathy's.
Mhm.
Notre Dame playing Louisville.
Oh no.
Maybe. North Carolina's playing Florida State. Cincinnati is playing Tulsa.
Mhm.
Okay. And then Florida is playing LSU. Like those are the four. I mean, I think Cincinnati Tulsa is a legitimate candidate. Obviously. I mean, Cincinnati hasn't looked that good this year.
No. The Bearcats are 3-point favorites on the road.
Yeah,
Short road favorite in that situation.
But,
absolutely.
I mean, I think Cincinnati's a good choice, but in the spirit of the segment, and I don't mean this the way it's going to sound, but like, is Cincinnati a top 10 team? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Okay. So in the spirit of the segment, then LSU certainly is capable, I would think. I mean, they could just do what like the A&M thing. Like A&M didn't stop Florida. They got a turnover and they figure out a way to get a punt one other time. And then they scored just about every time. So yeah, like that could happen for sure. And then, Louisville last year, week 1, had some success against Notre Dame. That was our first game of the year. Notre Dame was like, they moved the ball the first, like, I want to say like the first four or 5 drives, they got up and down the field pretty good. And then Notre Dame kind of figured it out second half. But I mean, hey, Louisville's still going to get somebody. Like, don't you guys quit on us. Don't quit on us yet.
That Louisville team beating this Notre Dame team is well within the realm of possibility. And it's well within the kind of team that I think Louisville is.
It'd be hilarious. It's because it'd be funny principle.
Oh no. Oh, wow. Watch out, Notre Dame. Oh man.
For this Louisville team that came in with the label of ACC dark horse, they don't have Clemson on the schedule. They got Cunningham, Javian Hawkins, Tutu Atwell back. They were solo second place in the ACC Atlantic last year. Best one season turnaround in the country. To start out 0-3 in conference play and then hand Notre Dame its first ever ACC loss would be hilarious.
Oh man. Funny. Hey, Brian Kelly, are you out there? Because Chip just said it'd be funny. You better go track down some COVID, get this team infected. Y'all don't want to get on that field.
In South Bend too. Oh man. Be very fun. All right. What else? Looking at the weekend outside of the top 10 trend that Barton just introduced to the podcast. What sort of has your attention?
I'm really interested in the South Carolina Auburn game. And I know it's not like the most interesting game on the board, particularly in the SEC, but I think that this is a good barometer game for both teams in trying to figure out how good they actually are, because I've been open about it. I'm pretty skeptical about this Auburn team going, and how it's going to look going forward. I think this is a South Carolina team that, it's 1-2, but its 2 losses have come to Tennessee and Florida. Neither of them were, blowout losses. They lost to Tennessee by 4. They hung around for Florida for most of the game, ended up losing by 14. And now, they're getting Auburn at home. And I look at this Auburn offense, and man, they got the win against Arkansas. We finally started to see some signs of life with explosive plays with Tank Bigsby. But I think that this could be a game where Auburn kind of struggles and maybe South Carolina comes out with the upset. So I'm really interested in seeing that game this weekend, because I think that's going to tell us a lot about both teams this year.
I love that pick. I think that's going to be a really interesting game as well. I also think Tennessee, Kentucky is going to be interesting. I mean, Kentucky had a couple close losses early in the year. Offense didn't do squat last weekend, but their defense played great. And then Tennessee, they got a lot of kind of love and hype, me included, heading into this Georgia game, and they got outclassed in a big way. So I think that game's going to tell us a lot, and is going to be a really tough matchup for both teams. UCF Memphis is this weekend. That's going to be fun. And then this game is not, I didn't know if we were going to call this like a spillover week 6 game. I guess this is a week 7 game, but Coastal Carolina, Louisiana, Wednesday night. That's going to be like, I'm as excited for that game as just about any game this weekend.
Yeah, I was legit sad when that game got postponed last week.
I know,
same.
But legit happy when it got rescheduled to weeknight just a couple days later.
Yeah, I pulled this. So the game that I am very excited for is Houston BYU, because Houston in its debut lost the turnover battle 5-0. Houston turned the ball over 5 times and won 49-31.
As one does, yeah.
This is like, you had 5 season openers postponed or canceled. Then you had 5 turnovers and you still won the game by 18. What got in a big hole early and then just poured it on late. You know, we talked about BYU, awesome on a Friday night, awesome on a Monday night, awesome in BYU after dark. But you get them at like 3:30, they're just going to be terrible. You might be able to knock them off. But this is a Friday night game, so we are going to get good BYU. I do not feel confident that Houston's defense is going to have the answer for Zach Wilson. And so I think it's going to be very much a game that spills over into the early Saturday morning hours for sure.
When was the last time a team went from a 35-point favorite one week against an FBS school to a 3-point favorite the next?
Against another group of 5 opponent. Yeah. I don't know. That's probably happened. That was a UTSA team. I mean, UTSA has probably been on the working end of a lot of 35-point spreads. But what's our boy? Who's
Jeff Traylor.
Jeff Traylor.
Oh, look at my wife right there.
Hot as fish grease.
See my wife? She's hot as fish grease. So the other one that I wanted to put out there, I was looking. I wrote this stat earlier for the CBS Sports 76 post on CBSSports.com. So 623 passing yards for KJ Costello against LSU in the opener. Since then, KJ Costello has thrown the ball 114 times, and the Mississippi State offense has 2 touchdowns. 114 pass attempts, 2 offensive touchdowns since that record-breaking opener. At Texas A&M, you're going to Starkville to play this Bulldogs team. I don't know, man.
Do they even have 2 touchdowns? What was the final score of the Arkansas game?
21-14.
Yeah, but one of those scores.
I thought the pick six was
the other side.
Other side, yeah. Arkansas had the pick 6 of KJ. So does KJ Costello in those 114 pass attempts? He has 3 touchdowns. 2 of them are for Mississippi State.
He's got 6 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. That's a nice.
Yeah. So are the malcontents going to be purged? Is this going to be a spot where they get the Aggies? That's another off the radar game that I'm very excited to see. 4:00 Eastern time. I mean, the 4:00 Eastern time SEC Network special. I mean, that's where top 15 teams go to die.
Here's a stat. SEC quarterbacks this season have thrown 20 interceptions. Costello's thrown 9 of them.
Wow.
He throws it 50 times a game.
Yeah, but I still think the ratio is off.
Oh man. Well, we're saving all of our Georgia, Alabama for the supersized big game breakdown for Georgia, Alabama. That's going to be coming on Wednesday. Make sure that you subscribe to the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/cover3. We'll be digging into it. I mean, it is a super exciting, super interesting game. Potential preview of the SEC championship game, or maybe the loser falls out of the SEC championship race. National championship contenders. All of it's on the line. It's Saturday night under the lights in Bryant-Denny Stadium. You can watch it on CBS, stream it on CBSSports.com, CBS All Access, and we will be giving that to you again on Wednesday. Big game breakdown. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernell. You can follow him at Barton Simmons. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Hey, golazzo.